Pull up, grab the fuel nozzle, and get ready to fuel up on trends and strategies to grow your travel center business in this episode of The Truck Stops Here, brought to you by NATSO. Now, here's your host, Amy Toner.
Hello, and welcome to today's episode of The Truck Stops Here. I'm your host, Amy Toner, and this is NATSO's podcast. Today, I'm handing over the podcast hosting reins to Lisa Mullings, NATSO's CEO and President. She sat down with NATSO Board member Robin Puthusseril of Greater Chicago I-55 while visiting her location. It's a great interview, and I know you'll enjoy it. Take a listen.
Robin, Thank you for being here with me today.
Thank you.
It's been great to visit your location and get a little tour. You've done some renovations, a lot of renovations recently. Tell me a little bit about that.
So it's one of those things where once you start, you can't stop.
Yeah.
And so we started with the floors in some areas, and then we said, oh, let's do the ceilings, and then we said, oh, let's do the whole bathrooms, and then it came into the showers, and now it's going to be the outside of our facility.
So I know from just getting to know you better and your family that you make a lot of decisions not just based on what's good for you economically, but maybe what's better for your customers or the health of your customers, for example. One of those is smoking. Can you tell us what the issue is there and what you've done about it?
I think I have to kind of backtrack a little bit and just say that, my father has been in business for many years. We owned gas stations and a convenience store, a grocery store, and we were always in partnerships. And our truck stop is one that's really just our own family. And we really felt like we had a bigger responsibility because we really care about our drivers here. And we care about our employees over at the other locations as well. But when you're in a partnership, you have to get everybody's approval. And here at the truck stop, we really felt like we could really stand up for what we really believed in. And we've always said that this is a home away from home for truck drivers and their families. And so we felt the conviction of looking at things that we sold here at our truck stop and said, well, if it wouldn't be something that we would want to sell to our own family member, then why are we selling it to somebody else's? Oh. And we look at our truck stop as our mission field. And so we felt like, that was the right thing to do, was to stop selling tobacco, and our conviction was that it was not something that we would want to give to our own children or grandchildren or so. And so we stopped the sale of tobacco, and it was the best decision we ever made because it was the right decision to make. And so sometimes we look at it and we say, well, sometimes making the right decision doesn't seem like the best business decision, right. But I think that's because you're looking at business with blinders on. And so when we took those blinders off, we realized that it had a bigger impact in other areas of our life.
Wow, that's amazing. So have you gotten any recognition for that? Or
we have, okay. Yeah. A couple years ago, we were recognized by the American Respiratory Association, and we had one of our state senators come out here and award us,
nice.
Give us an award for at that point I think it was like 15 years or 18 years of not selling tobacco.
Wow.
And so we have that award and recognition, and they said, CVS is now doing this, and we said, we led the way.
So you're here in Chicagoland. It's a great location. I mean, you are how far from Chicago?
We're about 25 miles southwest of downtown Chicago.
So you have a tremendous property here. Very great location. And how many trucks do you have out that you can park out back?
We can park anywhere between 300 to 350 trucks in our lot.
Oh, wow. That's quite a lot. And you have a very busy fuel island, I saw as well. You told me that you're getting a lot more local drivers. Is that true?
That is true. Being in Chicago, we actually have quite a few Central and Eastern European drivers, and a lot of them are more local drivers. And I guess the way that cargo is transported across the country now, Chicago becomes almost a hub where people bring in stuff to Chicago, and then you have smaller drivers that do shorter distances. And so we have found that we have a lot of of local drivers here, and so a lot of Eastern Europeans and or Central Europeans, and so we have them coming through and trying to cater to their needs.
Wow. Okay. And so, what other ways have you seen the trucking industry change? Because it really has changed and evolved since I've been with NATSO.
Yes.
I can imagine you guys bought this place. You and your father and your brother run it. How long ago? In 1995?
My father bought it in 95.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So how do you see that it's changed during that time? I mean, I know you weren't involved right away, but you were right after college, right?
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
So I would say that the drivers themselves have changed a lot. We have a lot more ethnic drivers now. We have a lot more female drivers now. Oh. Their habits have changed, you know, so even though you still have drivers here, their habits have changed. So, for example, we used to have drivers that used to frequent our restaurant, you know, 2 or 3 meals a day, and now we've got most of these drivers that will come maybe once a day, but then they'll purchase 2 or 3 meals, you know, in the through our store,
like the grab and go.
Correct.
Oh, yeah. Okay. That's interesting. So tell me a little bit about the biodiesel that you sell here, because recently you testified before Congress on behalf of NATSO and the entire industry, which we thank you very much for. How has that changed your business?
Yeah.
And I mean, and you're, I mean, you are a great truck stop, but you are a small family-owned business.
Correct.
And so this is not something that we typically see or always see with the small independent. So is this something others can do? And just want to learn more about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Biodiesel is something that really helped us as an independent owner-operator. It really gave us the competitive advantage that we needed to be able to compete on a national level once again. Here in Illinois, we have one of the highest prices of fuel. And so by being able to offer biodiesel, we had a lot of state incentives and then the federal incentives that allowed the price of biodiesel to be able to compete actually cheaper than the price of diesel. So we were able to take advantage of it when the funding was there and it was present at that time rather than retroactively, which unfortunately the blender tax credit has been for the last couple of years been retroactive. And so that's been difficult for people to get into it now. But when we got into it, it was present, and we were very grateful, especially to Jeff Hovey, who really helped us and kind of held our hand and walked us through the actual process of getting registered with the EPA and getting registered with the federal government about these things in the state and things. But really, how we even got involved to begin with was when NATSO held just an informal sort of meeting about biodiesel. It was sometime when maybe, God, it must have been almost 10, 12 years ago at a trade show at the NATSO Connect. Well, back then it was the NATSO trade show. In Las Vegas, and it was funny because I remember Pamela was like, "Robin, will you please just go to this? We need people to just, you know, listen to what they're saying." And so my dad and I just went, and we were blown away by hearing about how this could even possibly be a new revenue stream for us, a viable option. And so what we did was we listened very intently, and we found out that Illinois was one of the states that were really leading the way with soy, because our number one producer in Illinois is soy.
Is that right?
Yes. And so there was a lot, actually across the country, Illinois sort of leads the way with the best incentives on the state level. And it was totally by chance that we even heard about it, thanks to Pamela, I guess, you know. But to NATSO, we are very grateful because you guys have really been at the forefront of trying to keep members aware and educated about these different viable options. And so that's how we sort of got to introduced to it. And then from there, we were able to, in 2006, I believe it was, be able to buy pre-blended biodiesel at the terminal. And we said, hey, this is really great. There's so we basically, it's a sales tax abatement program in Illinois. So even before the federal funding was available, basically we don't pay sales tax in the biodiesel between 11% bio up to 20%. We don't have to pay sales tax. And so that's almost on any given day anywhere between 16 to 20 something cents. So that's huge for us.
That's significant.
Very significant. So we were very happy with that. And then we realized, as we continued to learn more about biodiesel, and the opportunity that we had was that we could possibly do the blending here on site. And it was at that point that we met Jeff Hovey, and he really said, hey, you can really take advantage of, if you've seen the benefits of biodiesel, here's something else that as a smaller independent operator, you can really take it to the next level. And that began a process that took us nearly 3 years to get all the licenses that we needed, because it was so new back then that the state really had only been giving these permits to blend to bigger corporations, and they weren't giving it to smaller independents like ourselves. So we had a struggle to try to get our permit, but once we did.
So you were sort of trailblazers in that way.
Very much so.
People do that now all the time.
Yeah. It's much more easier, and it's more well known across the country. But we had a struggle for almost 3 years before we finally got our permit to blend. And so we started blending at the end of 2013, I believe it was, and we have been blending now for almost 5 years.
Wow. And you're the woman that's the point person for this.
I am, yeah. So I had to learn how to work with the producers and, understand where the bio is coming from and the difference between the B100 versus the B99, and understanding how that applies on a federal level and why that's important that you know what your objectives are to be able to take advantage of everything that's available to us. But it really has been a game changer for us.
Wow, that's great. Now, I know that I mentioned earlier that you work with your dad and your brother.
Correct.
What is the best thing about working with your family?
The best part about working with my family is that I love them so much, and we all love each other. So to be able to spend that kind of time together is huge. And my dad and I, spend a lot more time together because we go to work and come back together. So we have a long drive.
You're neighbors, aren't you?
We are neighbors, yes. I am his neighbor, or he's my neighbor, however you want to say it. So we come and go to work together. So we have about an hour commute each way. And it's just really great quality time to spend with your parent. And my dad's 83 years old now, and he takes Pilates. He does. He used to be an avid tennis player, and when he got to 80 years young, his knees was kind of bothering him, so he needed a new sport. And I introduced him to Pilates, and he loved it. So he's doing that now.
That's great.
Yeah. That's so he's very active, and we work well together. And then my brother came on board about 5 years ago, and it just brings a different dynamic now, a good dynamic to our partnership now. And so we all have very distinct responsibilities, but is that the secret, to make sure that you have your own areas of focus? Or because I would think there would be some challenges with working with your family too. I think what it is for so long Dad and I always did things together, and now that Matt is here as well, what we always kind of remember and try to relate is, there's a Bible verse that says, the hand can't do what the foot can do, and there are different parts of this body, right? And so we can't expect somebody to do something that they really aren't geared towards. And so my father has reminded me several times that, you and Matt are very different people. Don't expect him to do the things that you've been doing now for almost 20 years,
Oh, very good point.
Yeah, so he's like the old wise one,
Do you operate under any particular management or leadership principles? Is there something that sort of sticks with you as you manage people? Because you have a lot of people that work for you.
Yeah. I think we're very practical, and we're very straightforward. And so I always, my motto is, I'm not going to ask you to do something that I wouldn't do myself, or that I can't do. So, we're very hands-on, and we tell everybody, don't ever say that it's not your job to do something, because this is a body, and we tell our employees, this is a home away from home for not only the drivers but for you all as well. And if it's if there's a need that needs to be filled, it doesn't matter if you were hired as a cashier or as a maintenance person. If it needs to get done, you get it done. And the same way in your home. And so we kind of have that kind of attitude. It's just if there's something to learn, learn it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So.
And how do you learn? What's your best ways of learning? I know you have multiple degrees.
Yeah.
But, how do you get at new ideas? How do you just learn in general, whether it's the truck stop or anything?
Yeah. For me, it's going out and traveling. It's experiencing things on my own or with other people. I recently went to Poland, for example, and one of the reasons why I went to Poland is because, as I was saying, we have a lot of Central Europeans and Eastern Europeans now that are our clientele, and we've seen that their buying habits are very different.
Now, that was part of the NATSO study tour?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. And so when we went there, it was very eye-opening because we understood their culture. And so one of the things that was really interesting, which I didn't realize, was that in Poland, they tried to get their customers to come back to their locations, to their convenience stores or gas stations or truck stops, a minimum of 2 to 3 times a day. And I said, that's crazy. Like, we're lucky if we can get them in the door once. How do you get them in twice or 3 times? And then I had mentioned that to some of my employees, and they said, yeah, Robin, we have multiple drivers, the Central Europeans, that come in twice a day. And I said, are you serious? Like, I didn't even realize that.
That's interesting.
It was really interesting to be able to kind of go out there and understand that that's part of their culture. And it's part of their culture for various reasons. But the same kind of habits are brought over. But same token, a lot of the Polish people have one warm meal a day, and it's usually at their homes with their families. But when they're out on the road, they do a lot more. They don't have sit-down meals, so they'll grab and go. And so we saw a lot of that changes happening in our store as well.
So with things changing so much, where do you see the industry headed? Where do you guys think you'll be in 5 to 10 years?
I think that we have to, as independent owner-operators, I think that we have to be the ones that are the real risk takers, be ahead of the game, so to say. So it really means being more innovative. It means being more nimble, so to say, and being able to see an idea and understand how you can apply that to your business. And so for us, we've got a lot of plans in the way or on the horizon as far as, not only in terms of renovations here, but where we want to be and what we want to be doing, and the flow of what we feel the customer base will be and things like that. So we have sometimes it seems like it's so big, but it's better to be thinking about that so that you can sort of make plans now, with that in mind.
So what advice would you give somebody who is thinking about building a truck stop today, or we're thinking about perhaps starting a family business? What would you tell them? What words of wisdom do you have?
Oh, man. There's a lot there. That's kind of a loaded question because the truck stop industry is there's so many moving parts,
Yes.
So I sometimes say I run a circus, There's so many moving parts, and every day is different. So you really have to be
think
available.
about the businesses that are just under one roof. You have repair facility, you have the restaurant,
Correct.
the store, the fuel. There's a lot going on.
There is. And, we have 55 employees that work here, but there are other truck stops that have like 100 or so.
Yeah.
And it's a lot. So, and thankfully we have really great management team and a team of staff as well. But I think what I've noticed is as long as you make yourself available to them, you are there to pick up the phone in the middle of the night if, an employee doesn't know what they're doing, And thankfully we have managers that do that as well. But there have been times where they've said, we can't get a hold of the manager. And I'm like, oh, okay, And so because I sort of helped with establishing all the procedures and the routine and the layout of every aspect of the truck stop, I could answer their question. Now that's an extreme, were they calling me on those situations? But regarding fuel or the biodiesel or the blending system and stuff, I say, I'm your contact. So I'll get those calls. And I think that it's important that you're always accessible to them, or at least they know that they can, or that you'll return their call right away or something to that effect.
I've always loved meeting you and your father, whether it's here or if it's in one of our events, because you guys are just such warm, wonderful, nice people. And it's just nice to see, and it's part of the reason why I've loved working for NATSO as long as I have, because of the families and things that are involved.
That's right.
So I thank you for being part of NATSO. You just recently joined our board.
I did.
And so now you're sort of my boss.
I don't know about that.
But we're really happy to have you.
Thank
and
you.
thank you so much for talking with me.
Absolutely.
All right. Thanks, Lisa and Robin. That was great. And thank you to everyone for listening to today's episode of the Truck Stops Here. You can find us online at www.natso.com/podcast. If you have any questions you'd like us to answer on the podcast, I hope you'll reach out to me at editor@natso.com. Thanks for listening.
The Truck Stops Here was brought to you by NATSO, the association representing truck stops and travel centers. Visit natso.com for more information. The Truck Stops Here is produced by NATSO in collaboration with Human Factor. Producers are Amy Toner and Darren Schulte.